Thank you so much, Adrian. That was a great panel. Wonderful friends of mine, all of them. Really delighted that we got into talking about so many different things there. We're going to continue on now with one of the kind of specific, defining things that the showcase does, which is companies that have actually scaled or started or scaled with their journey beginning at the showcase itself. And I have quite a few here. Before we get started with the live presentations of our companies who are here, there's one video I'd like to play of a company, a startup that went very fast after they first were profiled at Showcase and have now grown pretty dramatically, both in terms of being able to get in investment as well as otherwise. If I can just have the video for Phospholutions play, please. And here's a friend of mine and a friend of Larta's, Hunter Swisher. Caitlin, if we can have the video from Phospholutions, if you don't mind, please. Okay, we seem to be having some issues with the video. We'll come back to Phospholutions. If I can have my colleague who's here with me, Carlos Gutierrez, introduce our first speaker. And here he is, Carlos.
Thanks, Rohit. So it's my pleasure to introduce Naveen Sikka, CEO of Terviva. Terviva is an ag tech company producing pangamia trees with oil and protein-rich seeds for farmers and food companies alike. Terviva started in 2010, and you probably remember this from Naveen. In 2011, you were part of our NSF Commercialization Accelerator Program. At the time, you were looking under an NSF grant to propagate some of the clonal material and looking to get some early trees to customers. Fast forward 10 years, and really proud to say that Terviva's raised $54 million and now entered in partnerships to develop and produce pangamia-derived foods. And he can probably tell you more about that story, but we're really proud of him. And now 8 years since his Ag Innovation Showcase debut, which was in 2013, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Naveen Sikka of Terviva. Over to you, Naveen.
Thank you, Carlos. And you're making me feel old, but I guess that's what it takes in ag. You got to be around 10, 12 years to make anything happen. Yeah. No, it's great to be here. And I'm just seeing Michelle here. You're going to be able to transfer. Michelle, if I can also put up slides, I don't know if that's possible. I'm going to start talking, and if you could send me a note about that. Just to pick up where Carlos made the introduction. In fact, it's interesting. When we got that NSF grant back in 2012 or 13, it was to test out building genomic molecular markers for the pangamia tree to see if we could develop both a phenotypic and genotypic approach to accelerating selection of high yielding, promising varieties of pangamia. And the premise of our business from day one, and it still remains the same, is that if we can find a way to produce our food with a lower carbon intensity than the way food is produced today, and if we can at the same time use agricultural land more sustainably with more intensification, and also use land that isn't well suited for other crops, we could really unravel a lot of the issues around both climate change and inequality in the food equation. So what I'm going to do right now is try to pop up some slides here, or I might just go without slides. I'm having some technical difficulty. I'm just going to provide some opening comments about the evolution of our business, where we are today. And then what I'd like to do is talk about some choices we've made in scale up. So where are we today? I mentioned the pangamia tree. It's a legume nitrogen fixing tree native to the subtropics, particularly commonly found in Asia. The history of this tree is twofold. The first is that it's been used in Ayurvedic medicine, mostly topical, not much application in the body, but there are very strong bioactive compounds that are found in the beans of this tree that are both antifungal and antimicrobial. That's the first history of the tree. The second history of the tree is for reforestation projects in the last 3-4 decades. Pangamia, because it does grow well with limited inputs, because it's a nitrogen fixer, and because it's monsoonally adapted, meaning it doesn't need a lot of rainfall, and then even when it rains, it can tolerate a lot of rainfall. It means that it's been favored for reforestation projects where you want to put a basket of trees into the ground to reestablish the vibrance, if you will, of some degraded land that is in need of such revitalization. So that's where we met the Pangamia tree. As I mentioned, we've been focused on two things. One is to improve the genetics through what we call the low-hanging fruit, which is non-GMO approaches, both molecular markers and a phenotypic approach to planting out Pangamia. We've planted that substantially in 2 US states, Florida and Hawaii, where Pangamia was already found before we showed up. And we've been increasingly now focused in Australia, planting Pangamia out there. The second part of our business is to take Pangamia's kind of anecdotal, Ayurvedic, non-food applications and move Pangamia into the mainstream of food. We've been very successful on that front, in particular in the last 4 years, where we've been able to develop natural food grade processing at scale that's affordable and that essentially extracts these bitter compounds. And what you have underlying the bitter compounds in the beans are a very delicious, nutritious vegetable oil and plant protein. Both of these products, the oil and the protein, are going to be coming to market, excuse me, next year. The oil first, it will be coming in the form of plant protein categories, in particular plant-based dairy, where we're substituting for the functionality of ingredients like palm and coconut with something that's healthier, but that has a lot of body, and where we can also even substitute for other oils used in plant-based foods like sunflower and canola. So really interesting, exciting opportunities coming out of these ingredients. And if I step back for a second and I look at the food part of our business, and I look at the agriculture side of our business, we've made some choices in the last 10 years to get to this scale point where we have over 100 people in the company. We raised over $100 million. We've got hundreds of thousands of trees in the ground, and now we're making hundreds and soon thousands of tons of these ingredients for the market. We've made a couple of choices. Those choices have been based on our mission, which, to kind of pull back from my comments a few minutes ago, our mission is twofold. One is to decarbonize the food supply chain, meaning in particular, not just to have a smaller carbon footprint of food, but to actually make carbon negative ingredients. So our plant protein and our vegetable oil are carbon negative. The second part of our mission is to revitalize land, right? Is to understanding that there's a lot of agricultural land under stress in the world, understanding that climate change is going to further exacerbate that. Can we bring new crops to the market, tap more of nature's diversity, and revitalize that land, heal that land, and make it productive again? So carbon negative food, revitalization of land, very difficult to do. Sounds easy, but very difficult to do in this very well articulated modern food supply chain, where you have a lot of handoffs across the value chain and a lot of specialization that isn't necessarily aligned to land revitalization or carbon negativity, right? Our food system is geared toward affordability, scalability, and what I'll call accessibility, meaning getting affordable food at scale to the right places, right? That means, what do you have? You have seed companies that specialize in what they do. They sell to a farmer. You have a farmer that has a lot of risk management tools around them, often by governments of the world, like crop insurance and subsidies, to make sure they're not at risk. They're not going to make a lot of money, but they're not at risk in what they do. And then you have grain companies and then subsequently food companies, all these handoffs across the way that are geared toward scalability, efficiency, and accessibility, right? We want to focus on land revitalization and carbon negativity. So the first thing we figured out we need to do was probably be a little bit more vertically integrated. If actors in the system aren't geared toward doing each one of these, they're geared toward doing each one of these things the way they like to do them, not the way that we want to see it done, we figured we would have to do each one of these things. So we are involved in quote unquote seed. We plant tree stock. We are involved in farming. We partner with growers, but we do a lot of farming ourselves. We are involved in food production, right? We are handing off to CPG food companies now these ingredients for their foods, but that's principally because they're now aligned with us on trying to get to that sustainability point to the consumer. So the first choice we made was a pretty high degree of vertical integration. The second choice we made in our journey to scale was actually putting farmers at the center of our system. If we want to farm differently, if we want farmers to incorporate more sustainability into what they're doing, we figured very quickly we would need to connect them directly to the consumer, and we would need to economically incent them to actually grow a different way than they've been growing other types of permanent crops or row crops. And so for us, that means that when we built our relationships with farmers, we don't actually sort of sell them trees and disappear. We don't actually just take the grain off the field at the farm gate. We actually have a mechanism of value sharing. We actually pay the farmers for the crop. First of all, we actually pretty much give them trees at cost. We don't really make money there. Then we pay for the farmers for the crop, but we give them some upside based on the outcome of sales on the products further downstream. So they are truly working with us in a very connected way. It's not just a handoff, it's a true relationship where in exchange for working with us on innovating the supply, they're getting the upside of how that supply ends up in the market. So, so to summarize, to really drive change in the food and ag supply chain, a very long, well-articulated supply chain, we felt like we needed to put farmers more into the equation on the upside of growing food differently. And we made the choice to be much more vertically integrated and active across the whole value chain rather than just working on one point of the solution. So I'll stop my comments there. And I guess, Michelle, I'll hand over to the next person, or maybe Rohit, you'll be introducing the next person.
Well, thank you, Naveen. Really enjoy the fact that you're actually talking about land revitalization. It started off with that premise, right, with citrus greening and what was going on in Florida and how it's come back now full circle into a whole area that you're working on food itself. So holistic work. Thank you so much, Naveen. We'll get back to you with questions at the end, obviously. There may be some more questions here, but let me now introduce another one of our showcase companies very early on with the showcase, and has become a good friend and a really passionate, another holistic leader involved in a range of different things. A man after my own heart, certainly one imbued with a great deal of humanity, Chen from Zeakal. Han.
Wow, Rohit, what an introduction. Thank you for that. Shame I'm missing all you guys in person this year. I can't wait for this event to go back to in person. Seeing Naveen, one of my best friends at the showcase, was wonderful. Naveen, we're separated by a few miles, but I can't wait for this to bring us back together again. I think we were on a very similar journey, actually, to the Terviva story, and I think as some of the now what I'll call veterans of the showcase in the industry, we kind of went on a similar trajectory where technology innovation in and of itself was no longer enough for Zeakal. So if we rewind about 12 months, kind of at the height of the pandemic, we kind of sat down as Zeakal because there's a lot of new emerging themes, new emerging what I'll call priorities for the company, which was in light of a global pandemic, in light of a possible economic recession, what was the path forward for the company? Because up until that point, the way that Zeakal was developing was we were largely what I'll call a technology, intellectual property, and data company. So our business model previously was to kind of emulate what I'll call life sciences and pharmaceuticals, which is you would build a great technology portfolio. It would be a technology that would then be commercialized more broadly, possibly by another major or acquirer that would see that technology as being complementary. And we kind of took a step back last year and started asking, well, is that really the best path forward? Or is that really even possible in today's agricultural system? And the outcome of that was what we're now calling a new type of agriculture, which, as you just heard from Naveen, is basically the same recognition that our current ag supply chain is not necessarily set up to meet all of the demands and challenges of the next generation for agriculture and food. So as Zeakal, what we're focused on today is to improve the nutritional quality of major row crops, including soybeans, which is our first flagship product. And on this journey, what we realized was that the supply chain as it is today is not really set up to capture value or to reward in growers, processors, or end users that are focusing on that value rather than the volume that's a commodity-based system. And if you look at the pressures of agriculture right now, there's really two major pressures. One of which is agriculture is facing what I'll call declining quality. In soybeans, we've seen protein quality drop year on year as we've kind of filled these soybeans with more carbohydrates, anti-nutrients. And the result is we're getting more field yield, but really soybeans are being grown for two purposes, the oil and the protein. And there's only two major customers, which are the processors that want the oil and the nutritionists that want that protein. And that quality as it declines year on year means that soy is becoming less and less viable of a product as a feed product for the major supply chains. And soy is one of the largest row crops out there, so its deterioration is really going to be a huge issue for the entire food supply chain as well. And number two, the key challenge is that, with increasing climatic volatility, the consumer demand that food is more sustainable, we're not really set up. The agricultural supply chain is really not set up to kind of incentivize those along the chain to value those two aspects. So what we realized the challenge ahead of us was it was no longer enough to just do great technology, but we also had to innovate the entire supply chain in order for it to become harmonized to capture those other aspects that were important to consumers and end users, and really the future of food and ag in general. So we kind of went on a similar journey, but rather than saying that we wanted to become vertically integrated, we went on a journey to say, how is it that we align and harmonize the players along the supply chain in order to make a product that is not going to be focused on just volume, infield yields, just a commodity product, but really one that's differentiated where everybody benefits. So it really required us to bring the various players together and get them to work together in a way that is very, very challenging for the reasons that these players are focused on efficiency. Agriculture has gotten so large that we've become so efficient with how we produce food, but that means that it's really hard for any player along the value chain to stop, take a breath, and say, well, how do I refocus? How do I differentiate? Or even how can I take on another product that doesn't fit into the behemoth of what I'm doing today? So what it required to do was to actually bring a lot of players together to say that we know that you can do this part of it, but you have to almost trust that all the other players along the chain will react and follow suit. So if you look at kind of where soybeans is today, it starts with genetics providers like us. That becomes the seed. The seed goes to the farmers. They grow the crop. That gets sent to one of the major processors. The bean becomes two essential products, which is the oil and the protein meal. And that goes off to the consumers of the oil. That could be fuels, it could be feed, it could be food, or it goes into animal feed, which is the largest output of the protein. And we had to get all the players to say that if there's value here, are you willing to price for that value? Are you able to capture it? But more importantly, are you able to share in that value? So when we started this journey, that was what everyone said, it cannot be done. Agriculture is so large, everybody stays in their lanes, and it's really going to be hard for a small company like yours to bring them together in a harmonized way. But I've been surprised. I've been actually pleasantly surprised that the optimist in me won out, that ultimately people want to change and they want to do it. They want to make the world better. And if you can show them that there's a harmonization, if you can bring all the players together, it really creates that opportunity for them to say, all right, I'm going to take a pause right now. I'm going to reevaluate everything. And I'm actually going to just take this leap of faith and say that if I produce this better product, someone is going to pay for it. Or I'm going to pay for this product. I'm going to trust that you're going to make it better. So around our genetics, which is a genetics that captures more CO2, more carbon, and translates that into better nutrition, around this one breakthrough innovation, we've now brought together an entire supply chain that is now seeing, how this technology could transform all parts of their business, and is now taking that supply chain and repurposing existing infrastructure to really capture value over volume, price for sustainability, and really allow the quality of all of our crops to be reinvigorated rather than this downhill battle that we've been on, which is deteriorating quality in a major crop like soybeans. So in summary, our journey over the past decade has been technology and breakthrough technologies, doing it so in a capital light, business model that only startups can really pursue. But most recently, we've taken that innovation, that kind of startup lean mean attitude, into how we can be more nimble and really change the trajectory of agriculture to work together and get major players to collaborate in a way that will ensure that the future of agriculture is more resilient, more nutritious, affordable, and most importantly, more sustainable. So with that, I'll hand it back to Rohit to introduce the next speaker.
Yeah, thank you, Han. Zeakal is the name of the company. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it, Han.
For our next spotlight company, I'm going to bring up Advanced Animal Diagnostics. Joy Parr Drach founded Terviva back in 2002, kind of assist agribusinesses in management and marketing programs. And in 2009, she became CEO of Advanced Animal Diagnostics, or AAD, as many of us here in RTP know it. She's been also a partner in Next Generation Farms in Illinois, which includes raising dairy cows. So she has personal experience in the very technology she's going to be talking to us about. So Joy.
Hey, thanks a lot, Paul. So I wish that I could ask for a physical show of hands on how many of you are really tired over meeting over this computer instead of in person, but we're virtual, so I don't have that visible connection to you, and I guess you'll have to let me know via chat. But regardless, I think we can agree that we're all tired of the economic losses that were discussed earlier in the presentation, and that's why I'm going to focus first today on recovery. I'm going to share a unique opportunity that AAD found to use our point-of-care diagnostic technology and data to help avoid losses from this and future pandemics and save lives. And then I'll turn to the second topic of our session, which is regeneration. And I'll tell you the story of these girls on the screen behind me and how our point-of-cow tests are helping livestock producers meet sustainability challenges while also being more profitable. So to Sanjeev's point earlier in our last session about tapping into the $3 trillion healthcare sector, during the pandemic, we turned one of our livestock tests into a human test of the first responders of the immune system. And if I can get the screen share working right here, you'll be able to see a little bit of what I'm talking about. So we do something that is unique in all of human medicine. We quantitate band neutrophils, and they are an immature infection-fighting cell that's released early from the bone marrow when your body is under kind of an overwhelming infection. And we use it in our cattle tests to predict mortality in feedlot cattle, to the last panel's point about increasing predictive analytics. I think that's an important point of how we've upgraded our technology. But that band neutrophil is a marker of human sepsis. And if you're not familiar with sepsis, it is the #1 cause of hospital deaths in the US, and it is the leading pediatric killer globally. Unfortunately, the only way to quantitate it today is to do it manually, and that's really time consuming. One of the hospital collaborators we're working with, it takes 2 hours for them to get it done in a stat result. Our solution takes 2 minutes, and that's really important because in sepsis, every hour that you delay antibiotic treatment increases mortality by about 8%. So I'm going to show you a little video of how this is an early video, and it's interestingly enough, some pork and poultry processors in North Carolina. So we can just use a finger stick of blood, put our blood into the device that you see there. That test device has a dried reagent, so there's no need for liquid reagents. It's really simple and easy. You scan a patient ID, or in the case of an employee, their driver's license or an employee badge, and insert that test into the blue box that you see there. It's a combination of a computer, a robot, and a microscope. So it's imaging the white blood cells, first responders of the immune system, in about 1 minute and 20 seconds. You got a green light in that example. That means that that particular patient didn't have a low count of a certain white blood cell type that is correlated with being COVID positive. So LabCorp is one of our investors. They've been a huge help in this effort because we could collect not only finger stick samples, but venous samples, send it out to their central lab. We get results on site that show we're giving essentially commercial lab or central lab results from this little point of care device. So that was our development process. We've also, during COVID, kind of not only created that test and the process, but we've improved everything. So that's an old video. We cut the instrument size in half, and human collaborators have helped us reinvent our user interface to meet their needs. But I think one of the things that we've learned from our human collaborators is that because we had to do things that were not possible before in livestock settings, we've created a better product for them. So we can meet the most demanding needs of human testing point of care, because we had to meet the needs of animals first. So I like to say being born in a barn is a really good thing, because you've got to develop diagnostics that are cheap, easy to use, fast, rugged, and that's allowed us to create a system that has a lot of advantages in human medicine. Our human collaborators have helped us understand how differentiated what we have is, and we've also learned that that has a lot of application in companion animals, because the leading hematology system in the companion animal space is actually a human system. So we're looking for partners now to enter the companion animal space. And so it's been a real advantage for our investors. And I think that this is the kind of diversification even that Sanjeev spoke to earlier, as he talked about, kind of the convergence of food and health and how we can take advantage of that. We started out with livestock testing, and now by adding the human opportunity and the companion animal opportunity, our investors have 3 shots on goal. So I think, as we talk about attracting more investment to the food and ag space, this idea of diversification can be really important. To speak for just a quick minute about the other topic, not just recovery, we want to use our point of care technology to help our supply chains recover and be resilient for the next pandemic, because we can have immune system information right away, point of care, that can help us make decisions about protecting worker health. But we also want to speak a little bit about regeneration. The livestock technology that we started with was really designed with regeneration in mind. I am a beef producer, and I feel caught between the middle, between this need to reduce antibiotic use while at the same time protect the health and well-being of the girls that you see in the background. So our first test was a test for the most economically important disease in dairy, subclinical mastitis. And we see that because of this test, we can really reduce antibiotic use. Our users now see about a 60% reduction versus the practice of blanketing cows at the end of their milking cycle. And it's also good for their pocketbook, because we make them back about $250 per infected cow. And as we think about the challenge of feeding the world, we know that we need to increase production from every cow about 2 glasses a day to meet the US recommended daily allowance by 2050. Well, we're increasing milk production by 6 glasses a day in those cows that we find that are subclinically infected, all while decreasing their environmental footprint. We see the same ability in beef cattle. The test that allows us to predict mortality started out as a test that would replace the idea of mass medicating cattle when they arrive at a feedlot. We know that has a strong economic advantage for producers, as well as reducing antibiotic resistance, because we cut antibiotic use about 70% on arrival when we test and treat versus mass treat the animals. And that leads to a significant reduction for producers. But also that ability to be predictive. So that's a quick glimpse at what we've done during COVID-19. I think we've used COVID-19 as an opportunity to take our technology to new places and make new contributions, and will be interesting to see how all this plays out post-pandemic. So that's the update from Advanced Animal Diagnostics.
Thank you, Joy. And if I can have all the wonderful innovators that we have here staying on here, you can hide yourselves so we can come back to you for Q&A. But let me just introduce also another friend of Showcase, a company that was profiled here quite a few years ago, a Continuum mag, and a passionate young farmer and incredibly well-heeled person working with farmers and others on the entire issue of soil quality and soil regeneration. Mitchell Hora. Mitchell, on to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Let me see if I am going to be able to get the slides to work here. I got to share some cover crop pictures here, or else it's not one of my typical presentations here. So can I get a confirmation you guys can see that?
We can.
Good. Perfect. Well, so thanks for having me. As said, my name is Mitchell Hora. I'm a 7th generation farmer from Southeast Iowa. Family farm's about 700 acres, and we've been implementing a lot of these regenerative systems for a long time. We actually started using no-till in 1978, and we've been using cover crops since 2013. So we're seeing a lot of these things firsthand. And my company helps farmers now around the world to be able to monetize soil health and be able to better understand that the soil is a living system, that in 1 teaspoon of soil, there are more microbes than there are people on the earth, which is really amazing that soil is alive. It's a living, breathing system, and we need to help farmers to understand it as such, and to help them to be able to proactively manage for soil health and implement the more sustainable systems, but ensure that it's going to be in a manner that is economically sustainable for that family farm. So, of course, in talking about monetizing soil health, we've got to talk first about carbon markets, but I wanted to open that up, that there's other emerging markets coming too, not just helping farmers to be able to quantify and benefit from sequestering carbon, but improving water quality, reducing flooding, reducing their impact on aquifers, improving the nutrient quality. We already heard some more about that, and the ability to drive new market opportunities. Also, even for habit restoration, there's lots of things that are very interesting that are coming into development. The main thing on our side is helping farmers to be able to tell this story, be able to showcase the data that's needed to be able to make these types of claims. That's where we're fitting in. We have to be able to help farmers to connect with these opportunities. And from the ag side, we just need to be a lot more cohesive and be able to ensure that we're able to enable farmers to navigate and to be able to connect up the supply chain here, whether that be getting a claim verified or connected into a sustainable supply chain. But I think it's crucial, as these emerging markets are developed, that everybody within the current ag infrastructure has to be able to figure out how they're going to be profitable too. So a lot of this right now, we're trying to roll out carbon markets or roll out sustainability initiatives through current ag retail or current infrastructure. Well, how is that local person who's trying to get their end of the year bonus based on the volume of products sold, how are we going to shift their bonus to now be based on the sustainability generation, the sustainable outcomes that are generated, or the new opportunities that can be built out for the farmers that they're working with? We're helping farmers to be able to navigate the opportunities that are available, farmers that are in our platform, able to just see some of the current systems that are out there, be able to see, what could be an opportunity for them to invest in their operation and be able to utilize their data. Just provide a lot more transparency and provide more opportunity to allow the farmer to utilize their own data to find new marketing systems for them and open up new revenue streams. My thought, though, on some of the current carbon markets of today is that today's carbon markets are not actually carbon markets at all. They're actually just privatizing cost share. And what I mean by that is that today, based on the definition of additionality, a farmer has to enter their historical management practices. Then they agree to make new practice change and they get paid for the practice change. We model out their carbon footprint to an extent, utilizing existing models, but really that farmer is just being paid to make practice change. And that to me is just cost share. What we need to be looking at is what's that farm's actual annual carbon footprint or their annual impact. And if they are directly offsetting somebody else's footprint or being able to work down mitigating their own, then they should get paid for that, get paid for the progress that they're actually making on an annual given year. We need to just allow farmers to have more transparency around calculating what their annual carbon footprint actually is, rather than only relying on models to look at partial carbon impact. So helping farmers to understand, how do they actually move the needle? What are the real drivers and what's the real opportunity for them on their own family farm? For a farm like mine that we've been utilizing some of these sustainable practices for multiple decades, we actually don't really qualify for carbon markets today because we already have implemented these practices. But based on our data, we know that every year we are directly drawing down carbon, storing it in our soils, improving our impact on water quality and other environmental outcomes. But today, because of this one definition around additionality, we are not able to connect with companies and help them to offset their carbon footprint utilizing our farm as part of the solution. I think in order to be able to scale these systems and take them to be long-term and go into market, we have to fix that one definition around additionality. All of these programs and revitalizing rural communities, sequestering carbon, improving all these outcomes, it all boils down to farmers have to implement the principles of soil health. To me, a continual implementation upon deploying these principles of soil health is my definition of regenerative ag. The farmers are continuing to move the needle when it comes to minimizing chemical and physical disturbance, maintaining armor on the soil, keeping a living root at all times, whether that be with cover crops or perennials or what have you. We've got to get as much diversity into the system as possible and then integrate livestock wherever we can, be able to get that entire ecosystem going. That is crucial. And these principles just continue to hold true. So what we actually do is earlier last year, Continuum Ag launched the first soil health data platform. It's called Topsoil. It's a completely web-based system allowing farmers to actually be able to quantify and map out soil health. And now carbon is one of those drivers, one of those outcomes that we can help them to map. But number one, we're helping farmers be able to actually create actionable recommendations for managing phosphorus and potassium and lime and those nutrients that a farmer is going to continue to utilize on a year-to-year basis. But we're just helping them to factor in carbon and factor in biology when making those recommendations. Like I said, you guys can, anybody can go to topsoil.ag and check it out totally for free. Helping farmers to be able to just, again, document, tell this story, learn from the data, learn from the machine learning, reverse engineer the outcomes in order to avoid risk when changing practices, avoid risk when making annual decisions, but also better utilize all the dollars that are flowing into this, whether that be taxpayer dollars or private industry dollars that are looking at investing in regenerative ag. We've got to use data to help to optimize and make sure that those dollars are going to generate the outcomes that we want, not just trigger change on a model. But we're helping farmers to utilize the systems that they got. We actually work through independent crop consultants via a SaaS business model, working with agronomists, independent consultants, independent retailers, seed dealers, whatever it may be. To scale regenerative systems, we've got to work with the folks that already have the relationship with the farmer. We know that's crucial. And we see it firsthand. I'm 7th generation, like I said, and we've been doing these things on our own farm and farming with my dad, and I'm missing out. He's in the combine right now, and that's where I'm heading right after this. I'm itching to get out there. We're having success with this, but implementing regenerative systems is not just a money problem. There's a lot of money being thrown at this. There's cost share dollars from government cost share. There's state programs. There's watershed programs. There's a lot of initiatives, but money clearly is not just the solution. We have to help farmers to better utilize the dollars, to understand the data, to make smarter decisions, to overcome the logistic risk of change, not just only focusing on the economics. The how-to is crucial. And we've got to be able to help farmers to scale that knowledge, learn from each other, enable innovation within the ag community. That's why we're all here, is that innovation is what fuels, agriculture for the US and what has made us the powerhouse that we are. In the current systems here around carbon markets or other ecosystem service markets, that farmer innovation is just being completely pushed to the wayside, where these programs are saying, hey, just check these couple boxes and we'll write you a check. It's not that simple. It's not going to work like that. It's not teaching farmers to be able to drive innovation, to understand working with Mother Nature, not against her. But we're working to get that changed at Continuum Ag. I would love to take questions and dig into this further. And we're pretty open book on social media and on our websites and stuff. So happy to chat later as well. But thanks for having
Mitch,
us.
thank you. Thank you so much, Mitchell. I really appreciate that. Great to see you. Great to see the work that you're doing. Thank you so much. I just wanted the other panelists as well, because what I'd like to be able to do is a little bit different from what you would normally expect. You would normally expect that there would be questions from a moderator or a host like me. What I'd like to do is to actually flip it over to you guys and ask you guys to ask each other questions and talk to each other before I close out this panel with 2 more videos that we have. So go ahead. One question I did have for you, by the way, if you might just 20 seconds or 10 seconds, have you guys raised money? If so, how much have you raised, and has that enabled you to scale? And I'll start with you, Joy, and then we'll go around, okay? And then after that, it's free for all, so to speak. Go ahead, Joy.
Yes, we have raised. We're currently raising right now. We keep coming up with these other applications for the platform. So there continues to be a lot more work to do. So we do have a lead, and we've done a first close, added some great talent to our board. I see there was a question in the chat about that. That's one suggestion. I think when we look for capital, it's really about the quality of partner that we're recruiting. So we've got a lot of strategics on our board because of what they bring to the table. So I guess that's a 2-for-1 answer. My success, or my secret to success, is also surround yourself with the best partners that contribute more than capital.
Thank you very much, Joy. Han, go ahead, please.
So we raised in 2019, and we're still funded until 2025. So, raising new capital was not been our priority. It's really been about getting the right strategics to the table to reharmonize the supply chain. So I completely agree with Joy that a dollar gets you so far, but it's the quality of that dollar and, the people around the table that really enable the differences to be made.
Thank you, Han. Naveen.
ABC, Rohit, always be closing. We've raised, we just completed our Series E round. We were not cool enough to call our Series A a Series Seed. We should have. It would make us seem much less slow and long-teethed at this point. But no, we did just close.
Slow and long-toothed, Naveen. You are slow and long-toothed. That's the greatest strength you've had is persistence and stick-to-itiveness, and that's what every entrepreneur does, right? And so please go on. Don't worry about being embarrassed about A, C, or B, or whatever.
I matched the profile of a permanent crop. We are constantly raising money over the last 10 years. We just closed a $62 million financing round, which is a lot for a crop that I'm guessing 95% of your audience has never heard of. And interestingly, on top of that, we're adding some debt capital, which is going to finance some equipment that we're putting in the ground to stand up this first generation of Pangamia food production. And we're gonna need more cash. And in part that's because while we're not exactly investing in heavy assets across the whole entire supply chain, I mentioned earlier, we are active in every single part of the supply chain. And so that means we have a relatively big team and we need a larger than average amount of cash to run that team.
Mitchell, thank you, by the way, for a great story as well from your side. Thank you.
Yeah, we raised a small pre-seed round in 2020, and then a small bridge round earlier this year. But our main, and again to echo the others, it's all been very much strategic capital. There's a lot of money that wants to go into this space, but for us, it's got to be strategic. But our main growth is all driven directly by revenue, and that's our driver as being it's small town Iowa. That's our main focus, is continuing to build out revenue. But we are evaluating, okay, what should a seed round or a Series A look like another couple months down the road? Because we do need to grow fast. I mean, we're all solving big problems here, and capital is huge to being able to help us to do that. But again, it's got to be the right smart capital.
What I really love about all of you is that you're all oriented towards a mission and a particular kind of objective to make the world a better place, a sustainable planet, et cetera. And I'd like to turn it over to you folks to talk to each other. Any questions you have for each other, but also keep in there one specific point about the secrets of your success and any tips you might have for other entrepreneurs listening in. So if I could turn to, I don't know, Naveen, you are the most garrulous of the lot. So I think, as far as I know, so you can sort of engineer this conversation and then go back and forth, and Han and Joy and Mitch and everybody else. And I know Mitch is no shrinking violet either, by the way, but go ahead. Naveen, I'll start with you.
Yeah.
You can sort of talk to each other here. Yeah.
Well, the question I want to pose is ultimately for my good buddy Han Chen here, but I want to pull in what Joy said and what Mitchell said as well about how they've built their businesses. And I see a lot of parallels here to how we've all built our businesses, in that we're trying to do something really different than has been happening in the conventional supply chain. Mitchell talked about how carbon is not that simple. Additionality is not as sort of, check three boxes as we want to think if we really want to have that change. And I noted the slide that Mitchell put up, Indigo and some other players in the space. And I don't want to put words in Mitchell's mouth, but, really questioning whether or not we're getting to some of those real change agents that need to happen. And can we rope in industry to really help us make that change? Or do we kind of have to sort of continue to push that ourselves? And then, Joy, from her perspective, being able to integrate the human market into the animal diagnostics market. Again, I don't want to put words in Joy's mouth, but she built this very rugged, durable, powerful way of doing rapid diagnostics for animals that had utility in the human market, where there's a little bit more of a connection to direct outcomes in some respects with humans. And I guess I'm kind of curious about how she's found scaling that business in the very long, very clubby, very well articulated animal food supply chain. And I'll take it to Han, who made some interesting points about how, as effectively a crop trait technology company with really compelling technology and a really compelling leader leading it in Han, how he's been able to pull in industry, seed companies, grain companies, farming groups to actually work with him. I believe it. I know the power of Han's technology, and I know Han as an entrepreneur and how high caliber he is. And yet I guess I kind of wonder, Han, are there things that you've been able to do that the rest of us can take here and the audience can take as sort of like a playbook for how you were able to, beyond the power of your technology and your compelling nature as an entrepreneur, are there things you can generalize to and say, like, look, here's how I learned how to bring industry in to really collaborate with me while staying on the cutting edge of what I want to achieve?
And it's not just industry, right? It's also farmers, it's all the other kinds of groups
Yes.
as well. The entire kind of ecosystem, if you will. Yeah, go ahead. Lovely questions. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, Naveen, I think for every entrepreneur out there, my one advice is optionality. Every decision that you make needs to be about, does it create optionality in your company? And often we think, about, scale up as simply a matter of getting bigger and bigger or raising more capital to do what we need. But what I've discovered is that the choices that I've been afforded has always been because I've, raised less. I've always left more doors open that has allowed us to kind of grow and learn in a way that, doesn't kind of close options to us. I'll give you a great example. If you look at Zeakal, the fact that we haven't built significant infrastructure and have reduced science to practice and are now putting together the various pieces of the supply chain for infrastructure that already exists. So, we have not had to raise the kind of capital that other companies have. But what that means is that I'm able to get a product to market faster, more nimbly, and at a lower price point, which means my ability to share value and to, create a bigger pie for everyone is there, and therefore I can drive market adoption in a way that is much more easier than a company that has to make X margin in order to sustain a business that's burgeoning. So at any given point, your company, what it requires capital wise is going to be different. A device, a software, a biotech trait, it's all going to have different levels of spend. But what I would say is at every given point, leave yourself that optionality, leave yourself that ability to partner, to recreate, to innovate your business model, because as you get bigger and bigger, you become more and more constrained. There's only so many things that you can do. And so, in other words, your assets can become your liabilities in the future. And number two, I think it's just really important to constantly tear down everything you know. Up until about 12 months ago, I thought I knew exactly what this world needed. I thought I knew exactly where we fit into the supply chain. I thought that, the world was smarter than I was, that it was defined. And if I could just play well in my zone, that we would create value. And, 12 months ago, we tore it all down. And my team will remember it was a Zoom call. I put up all these white note cards and I said, can we do A, B, C, D, E, F, G? And it was like 10 different things where everyone has said, you'll never be able to do any of this stuff. And we challenged each of those assumptions, each of those constraints. And we went out there, we brought in new advisors. I basically, we had to humble ourselves to become like preschoolers to relearn everything about, what we thought we knew and what we didn't know. And the outcome was when we increased our knowledge and the universe of people that we were touching, we discovered completely new outlets. We discovered completely new value to what our technology was doing. And all of a sudden that cohesion made us see what I'll call a better world. So in some ways, I feel like I wasn't really an entrepreneur up until about a year ago. I was building a venture-backed technology pipeline for a Harvard MBA model on how technologies get acquired.
Yeah, but I'm not going to call you bureaucrat or a technocrat.
No,
whether you like it or not.
I wasn't. No, I'm not a bureaucrat. I wasn't some, here to get my stock options or bonuses. But my point is, I thought there was a playbook.
But I'll tell you, the most important thing, Han, that you brought to the table, of course, is apart from being attentive to what was going on around you in the world, the whole social justice movement, the kind of call for a real difference in climate change and the variabilities of climate. That is, to me, the entrepreneur for our times, right? And I just wanted to commend you on that. Let me go to Mitchell and Joy to be able to respond to what Naveen was asking as well. So who wants to go first among you?
So I think your question for me was about scaling. And I think that the advice that I have for all of the entrepreneurs out there is you've got to involve your customer in co-creating that value. So that's really what led to the opportunity in human health for us. So we were doing a trial on antibiotic reduction with a customer with a large cattle feeder. And through that process, we're talking to them and their big pain was, I've got too many cattle that are dying. So it's great that I saved that 70% on antibiotics, but antibiotic cost is here and the death loss for them was up here. So we developed what we call our survivability index that predicts mortality. And in order to do that, we had to quantify banned neutrophils, and that's what led to the whole human opportunity. So credit goes to the cattle feeder for that. You've got to co-create value, understand what they need. In order to do that, I think you have to speak their language. That's easier because my job is the family farm, but there's an investor on here today. I saw Ron Musin was on the list. So as he was diligencing AAD, put me in a room with 5 or 6 dairymen to see how's this conversation going to go. Can this person hold their own? What happens? And an investment happened, but a lot of good lessons along the way.
Yeah, Joy, you talked about the 4 gals behind you, those wonderful looking cows. And now we understand the full opportunity you've been able to put out there for human health as well. Really appreciate it and really appreciate those gals behind you. Mitchell.
Yeah, I don't I guess what I'm kind of thinking about right now and pertaining to kind of the question, but the observation as well, that, yeah, I tossed up a slide showing, a couple of the different companies that we allow farmers to evaluate. If in terms of signing up for their carbon program, and Indigo obviously being one that everyone here knows. But I was pointing out, some of the issues within these carbon markets today. And I wanted to make it clear that it's not Indigo that came up with those rules or any of the other players that were on there. And I'm not arguing that they are doing it wrong. Where the issue is with the registries. And my point here being, along to what you're saying, Joy, creating opportunity for everybody. But Han, to your point too, of we don't have to play within the rule book. We're entrepreneurs. That's the whole point. And I was there. So I'm one of 2 farmers on the working group I'm one of 2 farmers on the working group with the Climate Action Reserve, one of the main carbon registries. I was there when the rule book was written. And that was in 2019. Now I see we screwed up on a couple of the rules and just a small definition within a couple of those rules. And now I'm saying, okay, hey, the rules were written wrong. We need to go and we need to change the rules. And I think that's my call here as entrepreneurs. And it's looking at, okay, we see that the rule is written wrong. And if we don't go and change this to make it inclusive for everybody, we're just being naive to the fact that it's right there. Like it's blatantly wrong and we're not going to get it changed. It works great for other industries. That's where the definition of additionality came from. In other industries, like in forestry, a lot of times it can be kind of that one-time change to get a bunch of new trees growing. And now, we just need to mitigate against the loss of those trees. We need to foster them and enable them to optimize that sequestration of carbon. But, I think the opportunity there now to work with government entities, so we're involved in that on the state side of things, working with the universities to help us to gather data around quantifying our carbon footprint or quantifying these other outcomes on a localized basis to be able to then go to the federal government too, or beyond, go to the global scale with these registries saying, hey, here's a better way of looking at this. Here's a more scalable way that everybody can participate in, because today there's winners and losers in this that, there's people that were excluded. And a lot of that is the innovators. It's the early adopters. It's the most important people to have been brought to the table, and they're not right now. So I think our opportunity to help to showcase and improve.
Yeah, how do we get that fixed? Because I'm in the same boat you are.
We're in the same boat with the perennials.
Yeah. It creates a reverse incentive, right? Because so that tells me I should stop no-tilling and cover crops for a year so I can then qualify for this the next year?
Nope. All we have to do is look at what is your farm's actual emissions, your actual consumption, and then what is your farm's actual drawdown. But the thing that they're missing is that they're looking at the soil and looking at carbon in the atmosphere as a gas and carbon in the soil as a solid, but it's not. In the soil, it's a solid, a liquid, and a gas as well. And that stable carbon is not a real thing, except for as like coal and diamonds. Those are pretty stable forms of carbon.
I've been trying to engage kind of with the audience questions in the ways I've been addressing it with you. And there's one that also came in about, just back to this issue of reverse incentives and problems in dealing with kind of regulation and the rules that are written. And You may or may not have heard from Deputy Secretary Bronner's remarks. She's the Deputy Secretary of USDA, formerly with Virginia, the Department of Ag. What, if you would, respond just very quickly, by the way, because we have very few minutes left here, what is one policy decision would you suggest, right, big one, to make a difference to you and the kind of work that you're doing that's passion-based, mission-based, wants to make the place, the world a more sustainable place? Naveen, I'll go around again, but just, quickly, very, very quickly, because we have a little time left here to be able to answer that question. Go ahead, Naveen.
Being very quick, being very
quick.
quick about it, Rohit. I think the whole crop subsidy space is complicated and doesn't consent to the right sustainability behaviors. And so I think looking at crop subsidies in light of sustainability would be very helpful.
Han, go ahead.
We have one of the most rigorous science-based regulatory systems in the world, yet it's only as good as the worst country that we export to. So the US rules, laws already exist. The question is, how do we harmonize global trade so that, our regulatory systems work for products that could really help sustainability nutrition to be commercialized faster? Because if we really want to talk about rural incomes, a farmer in Iowa, he has to worry about 35 different export countries that have used regulatory as trade barriers. And while in the US, we've largely solved these issues, the rest of the world hasn't really come on board. So that's where I would be pushing, is to look to harmonize beyond our borders.
Yeah, we've been looking at a huge amount of protectionism as well. Joy, go ahead.
So I'll give you a different kind of answer. I think that we need more innovation, and one of the ways to stimulate that is better tax incentives and credits for investment in early stage companies, specifically in food and ag.
That's great. Thank you. Mitchell.
My main thing boils down to, again, having this open and innovative to allow for producers, allow for us as entrepreneurs to be able to understand the outcomes that are needed, but to be able to reverse engineer those outcomes in the best way that we see fit, not just check the boxes the way that somebody else wrote those rules. That would help us to better define how do we sequester carbon, and how do we create that ton of carbon so that the pasture can be able to do it, the row crop can do it, the trees can do it as well, but allow for a clearer, more transparent system around creating these terms, creating these outcomes. We have some of those systems already within RMA and within the crop insurance side of things, where if you're doing something that's not today a best management practice, there is a path forward for you to do something that's outside of that, as long as you're staying within your row crop industry or staying where you already have a county T yield. But that point was brought up before. Just allowing for that transparency and innovation is massive.
Thank you. Thank you, Mitchell. Thank you, folks. This has been a great honor for me to be able to host you on this panel. This is work that I love to do. It's a labor of love, and I really appreciate your stories. You give us the kind of energy and inspiration. If I can ask you, on the EventMobi platform, the app, there are questions that are still unanswered for specific people on this panel. Please do have a chance to be able to go in and answer those questions. I know our audience would very much appreciate it. So thank you all. We have a couple of things going on, a couple of videos, one from Phospholutions, another Ag Showcase alum, and then Lucent Bio, one of our Canadian companies in the Canadian Technology Accelerator that we're engaged with. So thank you, folks. Really appreciate it. All right, let's run the video. Thank you. Folks.
Hello, my name is Hunter Swisher, the CEO and founder of Phospholutions. We have focused our efforts as a company on phosphorus, a major agricultural input. We were founded in 2016 after licensing patents from Penn State University on the belief that sustainable production and responsible use of phosphorus is fundamental to support growing food demand. Our mission is simple. We enhance the efficiency of global phosphorus use. It's critical we reimagine the way we mine, process, use, and apply our dwindling phosphorus resources to even be able to imagine a world that can support 10 billion healthy people. Phosphorus is the second largest nutrient needed for crop production, typically applied as fertilizer. Yet some estimates show we could run out less than a century at current depletion rates. Although 100 years is arguably a long time, the most imminent threat stems from the environmental impact that overuse and mismanagement of phosphorus has on our freshwater resources. Over 70% of freshwater resources worldwide will experience some form of phosphorus pollution this year. Phosphorus pollution is a devastating byproduct of today's food system. More than 90% of what we mine is applied to the farm field as fertilizer to grow crops. Research shows us that only a fraction of fertilizer is actually ever taken up by the crop. We can prevent up to half of phosphorus pollution by simply just improving fertilizer efficiency. That's why we developed Rhizosort, a patented soil amendment and fertilizer additive proven to increase the efficiency, reduce the environmental loss, and improve farmer profitability. By increasing the efficiency, we can produce more food with less, meaning less phosphorus pulled from our mines and putting less phosphorus out into the environment. The less we use, the more our farmer can save on input costs too. Together, we can make a change.
Together, we can make a stronger future. Together, we can enhance the efficiency of phosphorus.
Together, we can make a change.